Today, I wanted to make a comment on a particular painting that I came across this morning. And the painting is titled What is Truth? Christ and Pilate. And it was produced in the 19th century by a Russian Nikolai Gay, or G, spelled G-E. And it is currently in the in a art gallery in Moscow, Russia. Now, the subject of this painting is Pilate questioning Jesus before his crucifixion, and so the backstory of this is found in the Gospel of John, chapter 18, whereby Pilate questions the Christ. And so in John 18, Jesus states, quote, in fact, the reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me. To which Pilate responds, what is truth? And I found this a very timely sort of picture of the times we're in right now. Whereby we have lots of opinions and viewpoints, lots of what people would classify as misinformation floating around, and especially with the advent of the internet age, you have the possibility of truth being spread conveniently, but also falsity. And the very incredible thing about the COVID pandemic that we're going through right now is that I find that it is so symbolic of this idea of how easily lies and misinformation can spread, just like viruses. And that, like viruses, ideas can hijack our bodies and our minds. It has been said that it's not so much that we have ideas, but that ideas have us. So just as how viruses can kind of overtake our bodies, we don't really have control of our immune systems and how we react to viruses. In that similar sense, ideas also have us, and in a very tangible and real way, can dictate how we act, from the individual to large groups of people to entire nation states. We've seen that in the past century, how ideas can have very grim consequences when manifested in full force by large groups of people or nation states. And so that's all kind of a tangent, but what I really wanted to comment on was this painting, What is Truth, between Christ and Pilate. So if you look this up, you'll find, so it's by Nikolaevich Gay, last name spelled G-E. And what I found striking about this painting was the contrast between Christ and Pilate. So the first thing you notice here is the contrast in lighting between the two. You see Pilate is standing in a bright sunny spot, a bright light, whereas Christ is kind of hidden away in the shadow, in the shade. And I found that this was very interesting because normally so I guess the premise of this would be that Christ asserts that he is the truth and the way, the truth, and the life, as a certain place in the Bible would put it, and that he is the Logos, or the incarnate Word of God. So he is truth in the flesh, in another sense. And what we associate with truth typically would be light, would be revelation and clarity and the ability to see things as they are, that in fact there is an objective as they are, an objective something that can be seen. You can't really reveal something unless there is something there. So truth would intimate that there is something objective. There's an objective reality. There is a something there that can be seen, and in effect that can also be hidden. So it asserts that there is something there. And of course, in this painting, we have Christ, the truth, sheltered in the shadow, or kind of hidden away in the shade, in the shadow. And so that first caught my attention because truth is typically associated with light and, revelation. Now, this can also be pointing to another kind of idea that truth is often needs to be looked for, or truth is often hidden in a very real sense. In a very real sense, a lot of the things that are not truth, a lot of obfuscations and kind of noise is really easy to come across. Just go on social media. But the truth has to be mined for, like a diamond, right? The something of value often is the case. It's almost like a universal principle. Something of value, like a diamond, or a very something of value, like the truth, needs to be searched for, sought for, and mined for, and is often hidden in the dark, and needs to be sought for. So in this painting, we see that Christ, the truth incarnate, is hidden in the shadows, paradoxically, even though he is light and clarity. And so the contrast to this is Pilate, who is standing in the bright light. And to me, this speaks of our current day as well, because often the spotlight is on all the noise and all that is non-truth. What typically grabs our attention, what is clickbait, what gets views and makes profit, typically, and we know this, I think, in our core, those things are not really substantial, and those things don't stand the test of time like solid truth does. But those things grab our attention for whatever reason, and those are the things we fill our days with, for better or worse, to fill our time, that we fill our time with. And so Pilate, the way I see it, is that Pilate represents that current culture, the current modern way of the state, or the way of society or culture. In that day and age, Rome was the governing power and was kind of the climax of human civilization. They represented power and order and stability, and in a way, the height of man. And so in this painting, Pilate represents that, and he is in the spotlight. So it's kind of showing how human achievement and the human way of going about things often takes the spotlight, just as Pilate does in this painting. He's in the bright light when facing the Christ. So that's one observation that came to mind: the contrast of the light and the shadow, and the paradox that what is in the shadow is really what is truth, and what is in the light in this painting is really the superficial and the temporary and fleeting. So that caught my attention. Another thing that caught my attention were the faces of Pilate and Jesus. So in immediately you see the full face of Christ. You see his eyes that are directed straight at Pilate, and they are almost ablaze. There's a verse in Revelation. I don't really recall where, but there is a verse in Scripture that describes Christ on his return as having eyes, like eyes of flaming fire, something to that effect, blazing. His his eyes are blazing and piercing. You can look that up. So what that denotes is that nothing escapes the vision of the word or the truth, right? Everything is laid bare in a sense, and you can't hide from the truth. And if Christ is truth incarnate, as we take it, um, you can't hide from him, and that's depicted incredibly in this picture. It's like Pilate has nowhere to go, and he is just receiving the full gaze of Christ, of the truth. Um, and this is reflected in our everyday language too, right? When we say someone's been lying or something, or is seems to be deceitful, we say they have shifty eyes, or they didn't look me in the eye when they were lying. So the eyes have this link to the truth, I think, um, because the truth is singular in a sense. It's directed. It is directed gaze. It's singular, and it's unshakable, unmovable. Whereas falsehood or deceit is kind of fragmented, So when someone's lying and they're looking all over and they can't look you in the eye, it's almost like a physical representation of the inner turmoil of their being, trying to grasp at different things to cover up. So it's like so the shifty eyes is like fragmentation of the soul in a way. It's not singular. It's grasping at straws, um, or it's trying to avoid the gaze of the person that they're trying to deceive. And when you're lying, you're trying to essentially hide behind something. Um, and that's reflected kind of in the shiftiness um, of the body and of the eyes, the body language. And contrast that with, the the kind of gravitas that you see in the Christ in this painting. It's um, he's just there. There's nothing. He doesn't hide from anything because he is truth incarnate. So um, he doesn't need to hide. The truth does not need to hide. It's almost reminiscent of Jordan Peterson's first rule in his first book, 12 Rules for Life. The stand up straight with your shoulders back. You kind of get that sense in Jesus's posture here in this painting. He's facing Pilate, head on. He's not cowering, even though he looks very decrepit and like in a very weak state. On the one hand, he looks like the loser by a certain standard in this painting, right? Because here you have a man of power, Pilate, and you have the state that he represents behind him, and he's bathed in light, and he kind of holds the cards, or as it would seem um, to many eyes. It seems that he holds the cards, and the life of Jesus is in his hands, and he can decide whether he lives or dies. And if you go to the chapter in the Gospel of John, where this scene is being played out, um, you know, it alludes to that. Um, when he says to Christ, "Do you not know that I have the power to either to save you or to condemn you?" Something to that effect. Uh, and the Christ responds, "You would have no authority were it not given to you from above." So, in a sense, it looks like he's holding all the cards, but in another sense, you know, Pilate is very much a card himself, and he just doesn't know it. But anyways, uh, in this snapshot, Jesus looks like you know, the underdog. Um, but he is, in essence, standing straight with his shoulders back because he is truth, and truth faces anything and everything without flinching. So you get a real sense of that. Stand straight with your shoulders back, facing reality as it comes, whatever may, whether it be Pilate bathed in sunlight and a cross looming in the distance. So that's another thing that struck me. And so so there's a third thing connected with that, with the piercing gaze of Christ and the full face of Christ being shown in this picture, is contrast that with Pilate. So Pilate, we only see half of his face. We don't really see his eyes at all. We just see kind of the half of it, the one side of his face. And the phrase that came to my mind was two-faced. You see one half of it. Whereas with Christ, you see the full face. You see everything. And I found that to be very interesting. Being two-faced is also another description of someone who's kind of shifty and deceitful, and not being fully forward and honest. And artistically, this is shown by showing only half of Pilate's face. And this could be understandable as being a politician. He can only show one side of his face to the people and not show another side. I'm not a historian or anything, but I would assume that Rome had to always show, you know, that they had power as they were governing over different groups, such as the Jews. And whoever was in power would have to wear a mask, in a sense. You see that even today. Politicians are not who they are on TV. That's one side of them. So this one half of the face depicted in this painting, I see as kind of signifying that he's a publican, not a republican. He's a publican, he's a politician, and that's part of his role. That's part of his duty to not bear all, because how can you bear everything to the people that you're ruling over, right? You can't show all your cards. You have to show a side of you that the people will respect, and that they might be intimidated by, but you can't show your full face, as it were, literally. And in this painting, you see Christ showing his full face. He's not afraid to hide his full face. He's standing there. And this is echoed in the crucifixion too, if I can go on a tangent. Because in the crucifixion, you have the truth laid bare, literally laid bare. There was no little loincloth on Christ around his private parts when he was crucified. For our, we need to I don't know where that came from, maybe from certain Renaissance or medieval portrayals, like maybe an art expert or historian can shed some light on this. But from what I've gathered, That was that came later on in artistic representations of the crucifixion. They didn't give you a little thong to kind of save that little last scrap of dignity when they actually crucified you. It was just a stark, naked, beaten to a pulp body that was stabbed or staked to a tree. So that's literally the truth being laid bare. That's incredible. I never thought of this. That's the literal. That is the literal incarnation of the truth being laid bare. Um, Jesus Christ being pinned naked to planks of wood. That's incredible to think about. And so that was a roundabout way of saying that Christ or the Logos and the truth are always laid bare and whatever uh, face whatever. And you have that contrasted to Pilate, who is kind of showing only the side of his face and only one side of his body, like the back of his body. I just realized that now, right? He's kind of standing at an angle where you don't really see much of him. Like Christ is standing full frontal. You see everything there. But Pilate is kind of um, like he looks a little shifty, even though he's in the spotlight. And so that was another um, thing that popped out at me: the kind of one-sidedness, the two-facedness of Pilate, and how that represents a lot of culture and society. It's a lot of the times it's two-faced, you know, on social media or on the news or in public, we show one side, and that's only one side of us. And we show another side on another platform or another type of social media or with a different group of people, where it's the duplicity of human nature that is portrayed in Pilate in this work of art. So that's all about that I have at this moment. So I guess some takeaways to summarize about this piece is so the irony of truth being hidden in the shadows, and um, we'll say not we'll say untruth or um, fleeting sensibilities being in the spotlight. That's one takeaway. Another is the piercing gaze of truth, or the Logos, as actualized in the being of Jesus Christ. The piercing gaze contrasted with the uh, the kind of half face that were shown in Pilate, representing the duplicity of man. So those are some takeaways, and I felt like I really needed to kind of verbalize all that because I just saw this piece, and the quote, "What is truth?" Oh, and the irony of asking, "What is truth?" to truth incarnate. Like, can you get any more meta than that? Or any more. That's just. You can't write a better. Like, if the Gospels were fiction, and they're not, I hold that they're not. But if they were fiction, like, what sort of genius could you have that would come up with that? It's just. It's too much to think about. It's like the irony of Christ when he's on the cross and he says, "I thirst," and he is the living water. The living water is thirsting, and the living truth is being asked, "What is truth?" Like, you can't make this stuff up. Certainly, if you were just mere fishermen from like from Palestine or Israel 2,000 some odd years ago. Well, that's just some of the things that it's worth thinking about. One other thing that came to mind. The vibe that Pontius Pilate kind of gives off here is that he's the showman, right? He's in the spotlight. He's kind of gesturing like he's in a play almost. You know, he's a showman. He's there to, he's kind of the best of what the world has to offer. The best looking, most respectable. He looks respectable, distinguished, approved by the powers that be. And this is in contrast with kind of a decrepit, unkempt, dirty-looking Jesus who is the truth. And so and he's standing in the shadows in the corner, kind of. That's another another thing. So even though Jesus is kind of off in the corner, you get the sense that he is really in the center of all this. This is all about him. And even though Pilate is kind of taking up more space than Christ is in this picture in a way, he's got the clothes flowing everywhere, the robe, and the arm gesturing, and the stance of the feet is like, commanding. You get a sense that Jesus is the one that's really in control here, even though he's kind of standing with like a meek, mild, like a loser, for lack of better words. But you see it in his face, and you just get the sense that he's the one that's in control, and that's quite a beautiful thing. So those are some thoughts that just needed to be thought out loud. Yeah. Enjoy your day.